Welcome to Self-Love Actually, a podcast that will provide guidance and support along your self-love journey. I'm your host, Hailey Curtis, a self-love life coach who helps people better love themselves by creating a life they dream of living. My purpose in creating this podcast is that it allows you to love yourself a little more, each and every episode. Hey y'all, welcome to the 10th and final episode of season 1 of Self-Love Actually. I am so excited to get into today's episode. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this past season and having a big moment of gratitude because the reason why I started this podcast was to just kind of show up and provide value to my community. I really been wanting to do a podcast for a while, but had just kind of been sitting on the idea. And the reason why I wanted to do it was because I realized that I started to develop a toxic relationship with Instagram. I noticed that I started to attach my worth to the amount of likes and followers and views that I would get on my content. And that's toxic. And I was like, you know what? I don't really need this in my life right now. And so I kind of took a step back from Instagram and been really trying to figure out like how else can I still show up for my community in an authentic way that feels good for me. And so that's kind of how I started this podcast. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick certain themes of self-love that I want to talk about and interview people on. And whoever listens can listen and receive whatever from it. But it was really something that I wanted to do that was, less toxic and also a way to still provide that value to my community. So it's just crazy that here I am recording the 10th episode of this podcast. So I'm super excited to get into today's episode. I will be kind of doing a little recap of this whole season and what I've done to kind of get myself prepared for this episode is I listened to all of season 1. And as I was listening, I was trying to figure out like a common theme throughout. And the first thing I realized is that we already have what we need. It's just our world has taught us that we don't have what we need. And they've made it more difficult than it really needs to be. For example, in this season, we've learned that we are born worthy and we are born with self-love. And over time, as we grow up, we start to put ourselves in a shell. This shell is because of our conditioning. Like I said, the world around us teaches us that it is not safe to express yourself fully. We cannot express ourselves like a 2-year-old can. That's unacceptable. And there obviously are certain lines there, but I do feel like with cultural norms, societal norms, and our conditioning, we have been put into this shell where we believe that it is not safe to express ourselves. And this reminded me, I forget what book I read this in, but they pointed out how women who are expressive are the ones who get talked about. Like, who gave them permission to express themselves and be so free, And it's the people who are still in their shell that are witnessing these women express themselves, and they feel like these people expressing themselves are breaking a rule, who gave them permission? And that's the thing. We get to give ourselves their permission to express ourselves. And the good news is we can unlearn these things that no longer really serve us, right? The fact that we need to belittle ourselves or that we can't talk too loud or whatever may be considered impolite. Like, is it really impolite or are they really trying to dim your light? And when I say they, I mean like the world, the conditioning, the societal norms, whatever you may have learned to be true. We can unlearn those things. We can figure out, That's not so true. Like I can speak up in a conversation and still be a polite young woman. Like we need to know that like it's okay to express ourselves. And our inner child literally needs us to express ourselves. Like think about what something you've always wanted to do, but you've been afraid of being judged for it. And specifically, like, how have you wanted to express yourself? Like, have you wanted to take a dance class? Have you always wanted to cut your hair super short or like dye it a certain color? Like, how else do you want to be expressed? Is it through your clothes or the way you speak? Do you want to curse a lot? Do you want to curse less? Like, all these different ways of being expressive are acceptable. And when you think about it, like the thing that may have stopped you is feeling judged from the world who also has been learned the same things you have learned. But that's the thing, like everyone else is in their own lane. They are on their own journey. They have been made up of their own perspectives as well. So it's a matter of you getting to choose what you want to unlearn in order to live in that authentic self that you were born to live. You are born worthy. You are born of this love. So it's a matter of digging yourself out of that and digging yourself through the fog and coming back to that realization that you are worthy of expressing yourself. You are worthy of loving yourself. So you should go out and express yourself in the way that you want to. Try it out and see how uncomfortable it is for you. And that'll be an indicator that it's something you've never done before, right? Because you've always believed a certain belief about having pink hair. You may have formed like a prejudice around people who are wearing pink hair. But the thing is, like, you can unlearn that. You can choose to believe something else that better suits you. Like, if it's something you've always wanted to do, why can't you do it? Why can't you do it? We need to break out of our shell that we were conditioned to live inside of. We have to honor those needs. We have to take the action in order to get back to our truth. I know, like, I used to be a people pleaser. I mean, I still am for sure, but I'm working on it, okay? And it used to be really bad. Like, I lived my life for other people. Like, I thought that was my purpose. I thought that I was on earth to live for other people. And the thing that I got twisted was like, I was not doing anything for myself. I was like a martyr, which means like you live for the sake of other people. And it's a really unhealthy way to live because you've got to fill up your own cup. And I came to that realization when I like hit my low, like I hit a burnout situation where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not happy. And like, I want to love myself. I like living that way led me to a life of hating myself. And that's not how I wanted to live. And when I started this self-love journey, I didn't even know what I wanted. I didn't even know what I liked. I didn't even know what I didn't like because I was so used to saying, yeah, I'll do what you want to do. Yeah, I don't care what we order. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we can go there tonight. I don't know. What do you want to do? Like, and if this sounds familiar to you, you might need to do what I did, which was I went through a self-discovery journey. I had to figure out like, what did I like? What didn't I like? And like, what triggered me? What was something people did that was just like, oh, I cannot handle that. And that usually indicated a boundary needed to be set. Like when people yell at me, no, I will not talk to you until we can have a normal conversation. So like I learned that about me though. Those are things that I didn't know before until I went on this self-discovery journey. And Farah and I talk a lot about this in her episode on self-acceptance. You've got to go through that self-discovery journey in order to accept yourself. Because once you go through the self-discovery journey, you learn things about yourself that become definite. Like it's not like you're going to change your mind. I'm not going to change my mind that I don't like being yelled at. That's something that I learned that I just don't like. And it's something I'm not going to put up with. And so that little thing right there, I've accepted that about myself. And so this self-discovery journey helps you accept these little parts about you, and all the little things really add up into a whole. And you start to accept the good things about you, start to accept your past, where you came from, and you accept like your state of being at the moment, and you figure out what do I want? Where do I want to go? And that's where the audit comes in, like you've got to stop and check in with yourself. It really helped me find my truth and realize that I was worthy to love myself, because I really didn't think I was worthy. Like I had mentioned, like I thought my purpose was to like live my life for others. And that sounds so silly now that I'm saying it, but I didn't think I was worthy of putting myself first. And this self-discovery really helped me find my truth and realize that the worthiness and love has been there all along. And it's just been a matter of sorting through that fog to finally come to that realization that it's always been there. Through this journey, I've had to unlearn a lot of things that I just was taught or absorbed as I immersed myself into this world. And it happens to everyone. There is no one to blame. Like this world is made up of a lot of different parts, and everyone is experiencing life differently. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you. What do you need to unlearn in order to love yourself and see that you are worthy? All of that, just realizing that you are already worthy, you are already lovable, you already have self-love for yourself. It's a matter of like sorting through the mess of the world to see it, was something that kind of came up through this podcast a lot. And it's something that I didn't realize before at all. And so I'm so grateful to have started this podcast, because I don't know if I would have had the clarity on this realization if I wouldn't have, gone through this. So I really hope that it helps you too, because something that's so beautiful about it is like, it is up to you. You don't have to wait on anyone to do anything. Like, it's so empowering because you have the choice to unlearn the things that are no longer serving you and get back to your truth, which is love. And you are worthy of that love for yourself. Another huge theme throughout all the episodes is you've got to slow down and check in. You've got to take a minute throughout the day to just check in and see like what's going on. You've got to check in on your body and see what sort of movement it needs for the day. You've got to check in on your relationships and see if they're taking more from you than they're actually giving to you. You've got to check in with that inner dialogue and see if it's something that is adding to your day or taking from it. You've got to check in and see how your body's feeling and if you should be getting a better night of sleep. You've got to check in and see if you need to do an audit of your life. Are you really happy? Like, do you want to be doing the things you're doing? If not, like you need to change it. You've got to check in with your inner child and make sure that they're feeling happy and safe. If they're not, again, you got to advocate for yourself, which brings me to that other theme that comes up in all of the episodes. It's advocating. So once you've checked in with yourself and figured out, what do I need to do here? What feels off? What am I lacking? And if you're not lacking anything, what am I enjoying right now? What feels good? And advocate for more of that. Taking the action to advocate is really, really important, because you can be in your head all day long around knowing the things that are good for you. But if you don't show up and advocate for yourself, what is the point? You're only letting yourself down. And think of a friend who constantly lets you down. You don't trust them. So when you let yourself down, you're starting to like not really trust yourself. So advocating is so important, because if you're able to follow through with the actions you want and tell yourself you're going to do, you're going to start building that trust for yourself, and you're going to get a lot more confident with taking action on advocating for yourself. You've got to advocate. You've got to move your body. You've got to end those toxic relationships. You've got to set those boundaries when you're feeling frustrated, angry, or upset. You've got to implement self compassion when you're suffering. You've got to believe you're worthy. You got to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. You've got to go on a self discovery journey, and you've got to nurture your inner child. There is so much advocating to be done, and it's such an important step because it builds trust for yourself and the feeling that comes from advocating. Like after you've set that boundary, after you've gotten a good night of sleep, after you nurtured your inner child, moved your body, like there's so much pride that you get to like wear. And it's a good pride, right? Like you showed up for yourself. You should be proud of yourself for taking that action, for advocating for yourself, because it's putting your future self first. Like if you're setting a boundary, you're teaching other people how to treat you and respect you. So the next time it happens, hopefully they've learned and will remember, oh, that's right. Hailey doesn't like to be yelled at. Same thing with like moving your body, nurturing your inner child, all of these things, you're doing it for your future self. And so it's only benefiting you and going to make it easier for you in the long run. So if you've listened to more than one episode, you know that I ask 2 questions at the end of every episode to my guests, which are, what is your first memory of an act of self-love? And what is your current favorite self-love practice? Most guests claim they don't really have a first memory until recently. And it got me thinking, like I said earlier, we are born with self-love. And we may not have had the language when we were younger to say, like, yeah, that was self-love, but we definitely loved ourselves. I believe as we grew older, we just grew apart from ourselves. Like our social and cultural norms and learned behavior patterns just put a divide between ourselves. And there's also like so many distractions. Like it's really hard to like pause and take a minute, turn within and check in. Like it's not an easy task to do. We've also like encountered a lot more task to do in our life. Like think about like when you were in middle school versus now, like you are an adult now and like there's just so much adulting to be done. So like it's hard work and there's just so much on our plate. And I think that we grew apart from ourselves in a way. And so that's why it's so important that we need to take that time to check in, to pause, and invest that time into ourselves in order to get back to that same self love that we were born with. I wanted to kind of recap everyone's self love practices in case you'd like to get a few ideas. Two of them actually said to stand naked in the mirror. And I don't know if you've done this before, but you will learn very quickly your level of comfort with yourself. I remember doing this like a few years ago and feeling really uncomfortable. Like I've barely felt comfortable looking at myself in the mirror with clothes on. So looking at myself naked was like really uncomfortable. But now it's like I look in the mirror and I'm like, ooh, I see you. Look at you go, sister. And like, I love you. Okay. And you are beautiful. Oh my gosh, you're beautiful. And like, it just shows you the amount of growth I've gone through to get to that point and the amount of acceptance that I've grown to have with myself. And it's something I'm so proud of. So I highly recommend doing some mirror work. And like my sister had mentioned, she did a journal entry after looking at herself in the mirror naked. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you should definitely go listen to her journal entry. It's at the end of the episode, on episode 2, Movement with Nicole Curtis. And she shared her journal entry about how just like what came to her when she looked at herself naked in the mirror. And it's so beautiful. And I recommend journaling after too, if you feel called to do that, because it may be something you want to reflect on when, you're in a better, comfortable spot of looking at yourself in the mirror. Another practice is cleaning. Oh, there's nothing better than having a clean space. I feel like when my space is clean, it gives me like that mental clarity to like accomplish things. If you know, you know. You know what I mean? And another one is cooking. And that's something I never really thought about until Amy brought it up. And she likes to like pour love into her cooking and, feed herself the nutrient with the intention of loving herself behind that. And, it's something I do almost every day. And if you cook or not, like I know that you eat every day. And so you can still use this practice as a way to like use eating, cooking as a way to love yourself. Another one is meditating. And this one is so beautiful because it gives you that pause in the day. It gives you an opportunity to check in and be like, where are we right now? What do we need? And whether it's checking in or not, it's still giving you that pause in this crazy fast world that we're living in. And I think it's such a beautiful gift because it's up to you to take that pause. Another one is having a good morning routine. And who doesn't love a good morning routine? Like when I don't follow my morning routine, I notice something is out of whack. But like when I'm doing it, I'm like, it feels so mundane and boring. But the thing a morning routine gives you is like, you don't have to make decisions. Like the decisions are already made for you. And in our day to day, we have like a certain amount of like decision making moments. Like it takes a lot of energy for us to make decisions. So when you have a routine and you just show up and do something consistently without thinking, it kind of gives you back that mental capacity that you would have otherwise of like, oh, what do I do next? What do I do next? What should I do now? It kind of eliminates that altogether. And so you're able to just show up and do this routine. So having a morning routine is a beautiful self-love practice. Doesn't really matter what you do in that morning routine, like as long as you're having that routine and gifting that mental clarity back to yourself, that's all that really matters. Another one is journaling. And I feel like a lot of people I talk to, like they either journal every day, they don't journal, or they want to journal. And right now, I am in a season of not journaling, although I'd like to get back to it. And similar to like a morning routine, I remember like when I was journaling, it definitely added something positive to my life. And now that I'm not, I'm able to see like what it gave me. And it doesn't really matter what you journal about. Like, I always struggled with journaling because I was like, what do I talk about? Like, I don't know what to talk about. And like, that right there is something to talk about. Like, I don't know what to talk about. And a lot of my journal entries would be just that. And like, it would just be, I don't know what to talk about. And then I would end up writing something, of course, because something was on my mind. So I think journaling is a beautiful self love practice because, again, it offers that pause. It gives you that moment to check in, like what's going on today? How was your day yesterday? How are you feeling today? Do you need anything to shift in your day in order for it to be better? Like it gives you that moment of that check-in that we really need to make more time to do. Another practice someone mentioned is working out. And it's interesting because movement was my first self love practice. It was one of the ones, like, it really kind of started my self love awakening. Like I had mentioned earlier, like, I just kind of got sick of being sick and tired of my circumstances. Like, I wanted something to change. And I just didn't know where to start. Like, you can't really Google, like, what is self love? How do you love yourself? And, I definitely did Google that, but I'm saying you can't because I didn't find any answers. And a lot of it's just like self care stuff. And I'm like, that's not really going to give me a path to love myself. So I identified moving my body as something I could do to love myself. And so I committed to doing it. And it's something I still do today. I move my body for at least 20 minutes for like my physical and mental health. And it's just something that is so nice to do because it gives you like that mental clarity. Like it's a double whammy. You're doing your physical and mental health a favor. And I just always liked how it was like a 2-in-1 situation. So moving that body is definitely a self-love practice. Another one that Larissa mentioned was visualization, which I hadn't really heard of before, but it makes so much sense. So, this is like visualizing your future self and literally imagining what it feels like to have that success, to be living the dream that you want to be living. And, if this sounds funny to you, like we already do this with ourselves of our past. So why can't we do this for our future? And I think it's a beautiful practice. Again, it gives you that pause that you need and it helps you figure out like what do you want for yourself? I feel like a lot of times like we haven't like given ourselves the space to even think of that. Like what do you want? It may take like a friend or, someone close to you to ask you that question for you to really think about it. So I challenge you now to think about what do you want? What do you want? And you know what? You can also journal about it and visualize it. Another self-love practice is sleeping. Oh my gosh, who doesn't love a good nap? That is definitely a self-love practice. There's a whole episode on that with Kelly. We talk about all the benefits of sleeping and how much it provides benefits to your mental and physical health. Another big self love practice is doing an audit. That's taking the time to figure out what do you want right now? Because we change, we evolve, we grow, and we unlearn things, right? And when we unlearn things, we change. And what we want may not be what we wanted, and that's okay. That's totally okay. And we need to take time to figure out what is it that we want. So, those were just a few self love practices that were mentioned. And I hope that you were able to maybe incorporate in new practices from those things. And what really stood out to me about all of those practices is that anything can be an act of self love. It's just a matter of like shifting your intention behind the actions you're already taking. Like something as simple as like putting lotion on, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, or like cooking food for yourself. Like you may already be doing these things every day, but you can make these things an act of self love by being mindful in the moment and putting love behind your actions. Like when you're putting on lotion, imagine you putting lotion on your younger self. Would you be gentle and like caring? Like I know when I put lotion on, I'm like, hurry, I gotta quit. Let's do this. Let's get on to the next thing. But like take a moment to make it an act of self love because you can. Like there's so many things that you're already doing in your day to day that you can just incorporate more self love behind it by changing your intention and being more mindful and gentle and loving in that moment. Before I recorded this episode, I had asked my community, is there anything that you want me to cover in this final last episode? And I did get a few questions, so I'm going to read those and go ahead and answer them. So the first one is, did making this podcast change anything for you? Yes, absolutely. Like when I first started creating this podcast, I was just kind of doing it to do it. And whoever listened to it, awesome. Whoever received value from it, awesome. And I think what changed for me was just my process around putting content out there because it is something I've always wanted to do. Like I want to express my journey and the knowledge that I've learned in order to help you out too because I know that like this stuff I've learned is meant to be shared and it's just kind of changed my process. Like the podcast gave me a safe place to do that because like Instagram was toxic for me. And I feel like I've been able to change my mindset around that. Like all I need to do is just show up and share what's on my mind. And I feel like I've learned that from this podcast and I'm now able to kind of bring that back to Instagram and back through other outlets too. So I feel like that definitely changed a lot for me just from doing this podcast. I learned a lot about myself. A second question is, what did you learn from this experience? I learned so much. Like I learned a lot about self-love and I realized that it's something that is there for everyone. You already love yourself, and anything can be an act of self-love if you change the intention behind it. And what's very interesting is like going into each episode, I learned so much. Like I came up with a topic, I chose the guest speaker, and I came up with the interview questions, but yet like I still learned so much about each topic. And that was just really eye-opening for me. And it goes to show you like, even if you're an expert in something, there's always something that can be learned, and you always should be learning more. And perfect way to wrap this up because I want to acknowledge you for learning more about yourself here at this podcast. And thank you so much for listening. It's been such a fun season. I hope that you've really enjoyed it and received a lot from it. And I encourage you to have more conversations like this with people you love because it's such important work. We really need to love ourselves in order to fully love other people around us. That's something I realized really quickly on in my self-love awakening, feeling like my purpose was to like help other people and like live for other people. I had that all wrong. Like I really needed to fill my own cup up first in order to be able to help people to the fullest capability. And it's just been such a shift in my life. And you're on your self-love journey. So I know that you've also been able to witness your growth. And I recommend just documenting it. Take note. And so you just don't forget because it's so important to reflect and learn about your growth. And because then you have a moment of like celebrating yourself and being proud of yourself for all the work you've been putting in because it's not easy work. And I really am proud of you. So thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. It's a great way to start that conversation. And let's keep in touch. Like if you don't have that person to talk about self-love with, I would love to be that person for you. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at I am Hailey Curtis. I will be posting more on my YouTube channel too. So make sure you're subscribed there, Hailey Curtis. And if you feel like you really need more support in your self-love journey, feel free to reach out. Let's have a conversation and see if coaching is the right fit for you because I really help my clients figure out like what they need to do. Like if it's you feel like you don't have time to take that pause, how can we create that pause? If you feel stuck, we figure out how can you be unstuck and figuring out different ways and the actions you need to take in order to like fully show up for yourself. And we also do a lot of work with rewriting those patterns and unlearning those behaviors and beliefs that no longer serve you. So I do offer a 30-minute clarity call where we get clear on what exactly you'd like to work on and also like if it's a good fit for us to work together. If you are interested in having that free clarity call, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram or you can go to the show notes below and schedule your call yourself. I do want to give a huge shout out to Pinto Media for producing this podcast. They have made things so easy for me. I really don't think I would have done this podcast if it weren't for their help. I thought about doing a podcast for so long, and what really stopped me was like all the different hats I would have had to wear. Like I would have had to figure out how to edit a podcast, and that would have just taken a lot of time to figure out. And Pinto has done such a fantastic job at making this podcast sound super professional. And I'm so happy with their product and the way that each episode has turned out. So thank you so much for helping me create this podcast and also being a guide on how to do this because I did not know what I was doing. So thank you, Pinto Media. That is it for today, self-lovers. Thank you so much for listening and let's keep in touch.